Alright guys, so we are going to be tackling the next step of angle pair relationships today. We talked about just identifying the types the other day. Now we're going to actually build in some algebra, do a little math with it, and show you how to tie in those types with the equations. So first of all, we need you to grab your notes from yesterday, which I believe is what this slide says. Yep, take out your notes table from yesterday, which would have been Monday, depending on what class you were in. But it's the one that we did with the huge table with vertical, linear, alternate interior, all those different types of angles. We have one section to fill in. So I'm going to head and go to that. While you're getting that out, something to know, we're going to be talking about these two words a ton today. The word congruent means equal. So if I say two angles are congruent, that means that they're equal to each other. So if one is 50 degrees, the other has to equal 50 degrees. Supplementary, on the other hand, means that the two angles have to add up to 180 degrees. So you'll kind of see some templates that show that, and they'll look something like this in the next couple slides. So if two things are congruent, that means I should be setting them equal to each other. Okay, so one angle would go on this side, one on the other side. They're equal to each other. If they're supplementary, that means that they have to add up to equal 180. So that's kind of our template to help us figure out how to write these equations. So in your notes in that last column where it says how are they related, number one, vertical angles. These are congruent, and then you also need to write this template in there, so just blank equals blank. In other words, the angle has to equal the other angle. If one is 100, the other has to be 100, okay? Next one, and you can pause and rewind if you need to. Linear pair, these are supplementary. They make a line, which means they have to add up to equal 180 degrees. Alternate, oops, I went too far. Alternate exterior angles are congruent. So again, the same idea of blank equals blank. Okay, and you can pause here. Alternate interior angles, also congruent. They have to be equal to each other just as well. Corresponding angles are also congruent. And then the last one is the one that's different, same side interior angles. Those are supplementary. And you can even see in the pictures that you have of those that they don't really look like they're congruent like the rest of them. It's because they're supplementary. If one of them is 20, the other one would have to be 160 to make it equal 180. So these are going to be different numbers. Okay, so feel free to rewind if you need to get one of those rewritten down. I kind of zoomed through that for time. All right, and you should add that info to your note card as well. So that bright neon colored note card, you should put on there either the word congruent or maybe the abbreviation like that, or supplementary depending on what it is, and then the little template. So those two pieces should be added to your note cards for each type of angle. All right, let's dig into today's stuff then. At the top of today's notes, it's got a section that talks about if angles are congruent, then what do you put there? If they're supplementary, what do you put there? So let's actually go to that first. If they are congruent, then that means that they are equal. Okay, so that's like what the slide was that we looked at earlier. And again, that means blank equals blank. So this is going to go in that box up at the top. For supplementary, similar to what we talked about earlier, they add to 180 degrees, which means that the formula should look like this. Okay, if two angles add up to equal 180, it's going to be angle plus angle equals 180. If they're congruent, set them equal to each other. So let's go back a little bit. So in this guy, let's just fill in the numbers first of all. Okay, so this kind of seems a little daunting at first, but it's really not. If this is 32, let's just start with what we know. Let's kind of work around here. Some of you guys might be noticing some vertical angles, some linear pairs, so let's start with that. 32, we just learned back in this slide that vertical angles have to be congruent to each other, which means they're equal. Well, if this is 32, its vertical angle is going to be the one right across from it, the one that's diagonal. That means I can also label that as 32 degrees. Now these other ones, they can't be 32 degrees. Okay, the whole thing has to add up to 360. But look at this, I got a line here, which means that these two together have to equal 180. Well, if I use my handy dandy calculator or my brain and do 180 minus 32, I end up with 148 degrees. So this one has to be 148, because 148 plus 32 will get me the 180, and then 148 has to go there as well. Now that's awesome for this little section that we have here, but now I got to figure out this group. Well, that's where our types of angles come in. So let's start back with our 32. And we talked about way back over here that, let's see, that corresponding angles are congruent. I can always find a corresponding angle no matter where it is. Some of the other ones, like alternate interior, exterior, I can't just pick any angle, but there's always a corresponding angle to this guy. All right, so if I look here, this is in the top right-hand corner of this little 4 numbered group, which means its corresponding angle would be here, which is also in the top right-hand corner of this little group. Okay, that's how I figure out how to jump from this group to this group. These two are corresponding, which means they're equal to each other. If one's 32, the other has to be 32. Okay, and then by the same reasoning we figured out everything up there, this is now 32, and this is 148. Okay, so a little bit of reasoning as to why angles are either all congruent or all supplementary. So let's now actually apply that to some of this stuff. So first of all, figure out what type of angles these are. Okay, so pause here real quick, look at your note card. What type of angles do you think that these are? Okay. These are actually vertical angles. Okay, and if you looked at your note card, you would see that vertical angles are congruent to each other, which means that 3y has to equal 2x. And again, I know they're vertical. They've got the little parts of the V crossing right there with the 2 lines. Those are vertical angles. Okay, I'll do another example. This one again, figure out what type are these. Okay, well, this is my interior section, so they can't be an interior set. They're exterior, one's on the right, one's on the left. That means that they're alternate exterior angles. And if I go back and look at my chart, we just talked about that alternate exterior angles are congruent to each other, which means, again, it's going to be 3y equals 2x. Okay. Go ahead and do the remaining, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 problems. See if you can set them up correctly. It's either going to be set equal to each other or equals 180, adds up to equal 180. So pause right here. Please try those really quick and then press play when you're ready to see the answer. Okay. This first one should be linear. Because they add up, or because they're supplementary, you should have set it up like this. So 2x plus 3y equals 180. Okay, there's that blank plus blank we were talking about. Here we've got corresponding angles. I'm just going to abbreviate them like that. So 2x equals 3y. This one got alternate interior. Again, if I look at my chart, they're congruent. So 2x, 3y, one on each side. This one's kind of weird. There's actually no angle type that goes with this one. However, I can figure out how to use that to my advantage still. Remember, I can use my corresponding angle to help me, kind of like I did in that very first one. If this is 2x, this is the corresponding angle down here. So this is also 2x. Just because it's a variable doesn't change anything. It still works exactly the same way. Now I've got a relationship. What kind of angles are these two? Those are a linear pair. Linear pair are supplementary. So I can set it up like this. And if you're having trouble understanding this, please pause and ask for help. I know I'm kind of zooming through some of this stuff rather quickly, but feel free to stop and ask if you need. This last one is same side interior. I'm just going to abbreviate that SSI. These are also supplementary, so you should have written it out like so. Blank plus blank equals 180. Fill in the missing blanks. The last ones we're going to do now actually we're going to solve for the x value. So first of all, figure out what type are these, okay? Look at your note card. What are you thinking? Hopefully you've got an idea. Hopefully you're starting to get the hang of this. These are alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles are congruent to each other, which means we start with that. One of our angles is 2x. The other angle is 138. They're congruent, which means I just set them equal to each other. Now we're going to actually solve the equation. So this is where our algebra skills come in. If I want to get x by itself and it's 2x, that's the same thing as 2 times x. Well, how do I get rid of multiplication? By dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Okay, that's going to get rid of that. And that leaves me with, let's see, I believe that would be 66 if I did my mental math correctly. It's a little bit late at night, so hopefully that's correct. Nope, that's not right. This is what happens when you do math a little bit late at night when you're a tad bit sleepy. 69. My mistake, guys. 69 is what x should equal. Hopefully you caught that yourself. Next one, okay, kind of similar to what we did up above. There's actually no angle type that this is. It's not alternate, it's not corresponding, it's none of those things. However, I can use my corresponding angles to help me make a correct pair. So let's get this guy to move closer to the 138. Where's the corresponding angle for this top left corner? It's right here, which means that this is also 2x. Now I've got an equation I can set up. These two angles are on the same line. They share a wall right here, which means that now I've got a linear pair. Okay, are linear angles congruent or supplementary? Hopefully in your brain you're saying supplementary. So this is our starting point, is blank plus blank equals 180. So this time it's 2x plus 138 equals 180. Notice how from the last problem it changes very much just by moving that angle to a different spot. This time I've got to move 138 before I deal with the 2x. So let's subtract this over. Remember your algebra skills, work from the farthest thing away from x, which is the 138, and then do the thing that's closest, the 2, after that. Okay, so this time I'm going to use my calculator because apparently my mental math is a little bit rough right now. So I get that 2x equals 42. Divide both sides by 2, and that means x is 21 this time. Last example I'm going to do with you guys is this one. Right next to each other, share a wall. That means that this is a linear pair again. And I'm kind of zooming through this to give you guys time to get the notes all done. Again, it's blank plus blank equals 180. This time it's a little bit bigger problem. That's okay. 4x minus 5 plus 55 equals 180. On this side, I've got some like terms. Negative 5 plus 55 are like terms. I can't put the 4 with it. That's got an x. That means it becomes 4x plus 50 equals 180. Now it's kind of like we did before. Subtract 50 to both sides. Get 4x equals 130. And then when I divide that, I end up with a fraction, but that's okay. I get 32.5. Homework is on